Hi everyone, I'm Jack. Welcome back to my channel, and I am very glad to have you here. I'm back to subject myself to the crazy woke ideologues from the trans liberals versus conservative events and put myself through a form of hell, which I am somehow horrified to watch, thinking this is where we are in 2023, yet at the same time sort of addicted to it because it's so ridiculous. Because I'm going to be looking at the rest of the prompts in this insane debate, I have a gin and tonic to get me through. On a more serious note, I just want to say how much I appreciate to everyone who watched that last video. I am honestly a bit overwhelmed with gratitude and surprise at how many of you seem to appreciate it. I got so many wonderfully kind comments, especially from trans people individually who expressed that they were happy I was talking about it. And you know what, it really gives me more confidence and assurance that it is important to talk about these issues, because even in my personal life, since I've started this little venture, I've had some questionable experiences, and people getting quite offended can really make you question whether this is the right thing you should be doing. But when I hear that people are refreshed to have a perspective like this, another voice in the LGBT community, especially from trans people, I appreciate that so much. So thank you to everyone for sharing their stories. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. I'm so glad to have you here. I've always been very intrigued by the world of YouTube. I have actually tried a couple of times before, but I think at those times, the topics I chose to speak about, there was something not right about it, but at the moment I feel so pumped, I feel so motivated. I am raring in my free time just to get back to all this stuff, and I can't wait to see where this goes. So please keep commenting, keep liking the videos. If you are new here, I would love for you to subscribe, and you can follow me on TikTok and Twitter at jack.jewell. We already discussed the trans women in bathroom situation, and without further ado, let's go back into the pits of hell and watch the next question.
I support the transgender military ban.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not well versed in the military, even in the UK. Let's just watch it, I'll see what I think.
If we're talking about feet on the ground and really going into war zones, are really dangerous for trans people.
So
yeah,
there,
the Middle
yeah,
East, you know, it's like that's not exactly trans friendly. It's actually the opposite.
I hate supporting, like what you just said, I hate supporting it because it goes to the narrative of should athletes compete in sports, you know, but
trans athletes?
Yeah, the drugs we take do weaken us.
So again, Jessica is very selfless. She can express two thoughts at the same time, that she recognizes perhaps this is not the right approach, but is saddened by the fact that we need to make this decision. I have an autoimmune disease. I can only assume that I would not be able to be in the military as a result. I'm not going to be screaming at people to respect my rights and allow me entrance into a situation where I may be unsafe or I may cause harm to someone else.
As a person with HIV, I was diagnosed at 18. I couldn't go into the military.
There you go.
Because I think that everybody in the military, as long as you can do your job, you can go in there and nobody really cares. But it is those times when, if you can't perform your job, that becomes an issue.
You have the trans suicide rate, and if you really want to compound that by the veteran suicide rate, that's not exactly a concoction for very positive.
Because we have this push for people that being a transsexual, there's no sort of mental disorder involved, even though it causes immense discomfort. And let's be real, when you need to alter your body that much by means of surgery and medication, you know, there's something going on there. I don't have disrespect for it. It's the right course of action for some people. But when people try and compare it to a sexuality, I don't need to undergo medical procedures and be medicalized for life just to live my life as a gay man, nor would it actually affect my ability to be in combat or be physical. She's right, those two things may not marry up well. Here they come, everyone.
I think it's very discriminatory to keep trans people out of the military. We pay our bills here, we pay our taxes here, we are Americans. You all did raise some great points about the concern and safety of trans people. Something does need to be done about that to protect us.
I mean, if you're even diagnosed with like mild social anxiety, you're not eligible to enter the military. When it comes to keeping America safe, that has priority over anyone's feelings being
Discrimination is discrimination, and I don't think there's
not always
any
a negative
other way
thing,
around.
Yeah, so again, Blossom comes on and all she cares about is, what about us? Who's looking after us? Why is this not fair about us? It's all about how can the military support us, not can we support the military effectively.
If that is what is determined for the ultimate safety and effectiveness of the military, nothing should come before that.
Blaire, have you ever worked directly with trans people? Have you ever worked
I
directly?
am right now. I am right now.
No,
We're
directly
surrounded by
in
them.
services in terms of nonprofits
Sir,
and
she's
actually
a
getting
trans person.
clientele.
She's not
That's my
grassroots.
entire
She is
career.
not a grassroots
Not
person
grassroots.
because truth be told, a lot of our
What does that
community
even mean?
is in grassroots.
Have you ever had a
Nonprofit
client list of
organizations that are
transgender
trans.
people?
I really want to see what you've done for those organizations because I don't see any of y'all on the front line.
I've dedicated my entire life to that, right? I access millions of people every single month on all my social media. And I have people reaching out all the time saying that I've saved them from,
what are
just
you
like we
physically
mentioned,
doing,
suicide.
Blaire?
Okay, whoa. Somehow this has gone from the military to just talking about Blaire's career. I'm not surprised, to be honest. But one thing that Blossom did at the beginning was she just looked at the rest of the group and she said, she's not grassroots. She's not grassroots. And I'm here like, hello, she is sitting right there. I mean, you can say her name. You can actually address her. You can see the logic of, yeah, it is great to see an impact on a one-to-one level and be with people physically, but you cannot negate the impact of someone who has millions of followers online when these people are potentially working at some activist organizations that actually have really poor values and lobby for ridiculous things. Now, I'm not sure about that. Don't really know too much about them. But it's clear that this is just a way for them to have a dig at her because they obviously disagree with her rhetoric and the kind of stuff she talks about. The front line, I mean, it's funny because we're talking about the military and then she compares working at an activist organization as the front line.
It's
She's very
disappointing that you would
disconnected.
disrespect all of the people that are in community service and all of these social workers that actually do
Correct.
help trans people.
How is she disrespecting them? Like, they're looking down on her saying that our work is more reputable than yours. Did she say that? She's not saying my impact is greater or better than yours, but of course, they're happy to read it that way because they clearly want to vilify her in this situation. And then another hypocritical thing I'd like to point out here is that they're all here on a debate, which is streaming on YouTube. And no doubt all of them think, I'm here because I want to make a difference and I want people to feel represented. Somehow that's not considered grassroots or front line.
Because this is where y'all's privilege come in. Because if y'all don't need
My privilege?
services,
My
from
content is a
trans-
resource.
If you do not need
First of
services
all,
from
ma'am, don't come for my
nonprofits
privilege.
that are trans-led,
Because
you
I
have
was raised by
privilege
drug
and you
addicts.
have
I have
access.
HIV.
God, I'm so sick of people bringing privilege into stuff. Oh, you're making a valid point and I disagree with it. So, I'm going to pull the privilege card. And I have such a problem with the way we talk about privilege because you can look at someone and you can reference their sex, you can reference their skin tone, you can reference what socioeconomic background they came from, but then somehow we discount all other information when it comes to privilege. We discount adverse child experiences, medical situations people go through, awful shitty things that happen to someone. You never know what they've been through. Some people are actually really good, believe it or not, at going through things and taking responsibility for them and not projecting their issues onto someone else and saying, poor me, I've been through all this stuff, give me all these opportunities and give me an excuse to act like a complete asshole. But no, a lot of people have the decency and self-respect to feel self-gratified within themselves that actually I've had many struggles and I've come out of them because I did that. And I'm not going to put that back on you and say, listen to me and validate my opinion and invalidate yours just because of the things I've been through. But they don't even go that far. All they do is look at the skin level, at the sex level, and it's so reductive. I'm sick of it. And you know what? There's been such a big difference between the content I'm posting here and TikTok, because on TikTok, even though I've been getting so many views, it's like a complete minefield in there. I make a video and it's like I'm setting off a grenade. And I can't tell you the amount of ideologues that I've ended up in debates with. I mean, I've now kind of realized there's no point. But anytime I try and have a nuanced opinion about anything, they say I'm not allowed to have the opinion because it's not my experience, which is totally ridiculous. And also that they invalidate my opinion because I am cis, white, and male. Well, I mean, I am, even though the word cis is just ridiculous and it's a slur. However, me being gay is no longer oppressed enough. Because I'm male and because I'm white, that means I no longer have a voice at the table. It's ridiculous.
In serving in the military, it's not a right. They can disqualify you for any reason, physical, anything. People get kicked out all the time because they can't pass PT tests.
Right.
And overseas, yeah, you don't necessarily have access to refrigerators for your testosterone or any of that other stuff. So if you're taking injections, it's a lot
I'm
different.
supposed to refrigerate it?
I don't know. I don't take
And
testosterone.
that's going to melt in the Middle
Hormones
Eastern
are
sun,
always-
believe that.
Hormones are
That
not always-
estradiol is going to be
Female
blue
hormones
goo.
are not always refrigerated. Let's just make that clear.
Oh my God. So it's just a simple misunderstanding and she takes that as an opportunity to virtue signal. Let me just be clear that not everyone's hormones are refrigerated. And it's the same talking point when you're trying to debate that argument, are trans women women? And then people say, well, not all women can get pregnant. Well, yeah, but that's not the point. They're still of the nature to get pregnant. That's the systems their bodies are built around.
I just really hope that the people at the top that you're referring to aren't transphobic, because let's be clear of the isms that are in the military.
Man, we live
that
in
a lot of us
America.
face.
People are allowed
Excuse me,
to
I'm
be.
speaking. Do not interrupt a black trans woman when she's speaking.
You've
Let's be
interrupted
very
me
clear.
hella
When it comes
times.
to when it
Hella
comes to
times.
isms.
Did the interrupter just
Again,
say
if you
use
are
your
black,
skin tone
if
to
you
say
are
you could
black,
interrupt
if
her?
you are black and
That's
trans
amazing.
and you want to go into the military, I am quite sure that my experience would not look the same as y'all's. And if we can't wake that up, then we're really being complicit.
They don't look at your race.
I don't think your
But
skin tone makes any difference.
Well,
As somebody,
yes, it does. Well,
as
but
somebody,
it doesn't.
no, as somebody who's
But it
serving in the
doesn't.
military,
For you to
as
tell a
somebody
black
who,
person
no,
that
as,
is so
as somebody who's
problematic.
serving,
For
as
you
so-
to
why
tell
do
a
you have to
person of
put
color
black in
here,
front of it?
because this is my experience and this is my reality. First of all,
It has nothing
that
to
is
do with
so
your transness,
disrespectful
though.
to tell a person
I'm
of
gonna have an
color,
aneurysm.
a black person, how they should feel. How dare you sit up there
Okay,
and
well,
say
no,
that?
it's disrespectful
as
for
somebody
you to
who's
tell a white
serving-
person
hold on,
that.
just a
You
second. Let me
screamed
finish
at
my
him,
point.
and you
I did not
just
scream
yes,
at a
you
point.
did.
No,
No, you're
you
being
becoming
disrespectful.
combative.
Rewind the tape,
You
you
wanted me
screamed.
here, and I'm
You
here.
screamed.
So which
I just don't have words for this situation right now. This is actually a topic I feel very passionate about at the moment, because the amount of people that have said to me recently that I'm not allowed to have an opinion because I'm white, what does that sound like? Does it sound like the 1940s when we were telling black people that they didn't have a voice, they couldn't vote? I mean, did that happen in the 1940s? It did happen. But we were viewing a certain class of people as having an invalid seat at the table because of the color of their skin. And the whole concept of racism in itself is looking down at someone and feeling someone is inferior to you because of their race. So the whole idea that you cannot be racist towards white people actually negates the definition of racism itself. Because if you can only be racist towards one race, that is actually racism. And she's the only black person on this panel. Black people go through their own experience. I'm not invalidating that. But who's making it about race? Who's making it about race? She is. She's telling a white man that he cannot have an opinion because he's white. She's telling a white trans woman that she's not allowed to say, but how is it about race? How dare you? How dare you talk to a black trans woman like that? And for her to say, don't interrupt a black trans woman when she's speaking. Okay, so by that logic, no one can interrupt you, but does that mean you can interrupt all of them because they're white? It's utter hypocrisy. This needs to stop happening because, like everyone says, the pendulum is going to swing and white people are going to get very sick. In fact, a lot of us already are very sick of this. I'm sick of being told I can't have an opinion because I'm male and because I'm white. I can have an opinion. And no, I'm not a racist person. And as many white woke people can come to me and say, you are racist because you grew up in this white supremacy society, your ancestors enslaved people. I didn't enslave anyone. By that logic, if I met someone and their father was like a or something, am I going to say, sorry, I'm not going to be friends with you. I don't want to talk to you because of the actions of your father? How shitty would that be? But that's what they're doing. That is what they're doing. White people are having to stand up in scenarios and apologize for their ancestors. Were you enslaved? Did I enslave you? Do I have friends who are black people? Do I treat them any differently? Absolutely not. So what is racism? Because it's certainly not that.
It's okay for minors to get top surgery.
No. No. Absolutely no.
Really?
You guys waited on that?
That's pretty violent.
You can just see in this debate, because I've watched other Jubilees, I'm sure everyone has, and what's interesting is that you always get people from both sides walking forward for every prompt. There's a mix, but you can just see how divided the trans community is. And it is always people on one side or people on the other side. And there's just this dichotomy of a need for anyone who is liberal and activist. They're not able to, even if they feel they have an opinion that maybe some other people have, they won't associate themselves with that opinion because then they are victim to cancel culture. And we can see it playing out in this debate. Like every single one so far, it's been everyone from one side and then everyone from the other side. And that's not how psychology and life works. You don't always have a group of people that just vehemently agree with each other on every point, but this is how it's turning out. I mean, honestly, I think the conservatives are not in this case. I feel like they are all more individuals than the others. Just the fact that it's so divided shows us the issues we're having.
The vibe is like like as someone who had top surgery and went on hormones, like it's a very emotionally intense experience. I think in terms of like minors getting surgery, like the reason why I'm not like no to that is because I feel like maybe someone's like 17 or something. I honestly feel like it is a really intense surgery.
When do we ever bring up a topic of minors cutting a part of their body off and say, yeah, I kind of feel like the vibe is this? You walk into a doctor's office, yeah, I'm thinking of removing my breast, and the doctor says, well, you know what? The current vibe is that you can do it if you know you want it. And if you don't want it, then don't do it. It shouldn't be talked about in this way. We're just talking about it in such a flippant manner.
So I'm not a trans man, so I don't have the experience or whatnot, but I do think that it has to be done safely. There is a process when it comes to having these types of gender-affirming surgeries.
Oh my God. Oh my God, the experience. I don't have the experience, or this is my experience. Why do we have this narrative where we have to have the experience itself to have an opinion? I'm not a trans man, so I don't have the experience. She's basically saying, well, it's not me, so I am going to say something, but you're free to invalidate it. And it's the same rhetoric we have going on all the time. The activists on TikTok say, why do you feel you can come up here and talk about this? It's not you. Well, when we have a whole group of people in society that get to make all the decisions that pertains to them, that's not a good recipe for anyone. Actually, it kind of sounds like the Nazis, because they had a certain ideology and belief system, and their belief system was everyone needs to think the same as us, and we're going to force you to, and that's not productive.
You know what I'm saying? Talking with your parents and then going to endocrinologists and going through therapy to make sure this is right for you. You should choose with the right medical education, with safety, and with full understanding of what is a benefit and what may not be a benefit.
It just sounds like complete word vomit. I'm sick of this. There's a process. There's a process. Well, they have to go through all these hoops and go through all these steps. And, you know, that may be the case for some people. For some kids, they may have spent 5 years wanting to get that top surgery, and then they did. But the reality is that that's actually not is what's happening. These things are happening far too easy. Puberty blockers, hormones, top surgery at 12, 13 years old. It's not happening. The process is not there. And the thing about it is, even with the process in place, I don't believe they can consent to that. You've all heard this argument before, but how can you consent to removing a part of your body when you are a child? It's absolutely insane. If someone told me that I would be sitting here 10 years ago, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, someone told me you're going to be sitting, talking on camera about whether people can cut their breasts off when they're 14 years old or not. What the hell are you talking about? Look, I understand that obviously for some girls who are identifying as trans men, this is a very difficult experience, and I don't know what that is like. This is me saying this is not my experience. I don't know what that is like, and it must be incredibly debilitating and difficult, but I don't believe that opening this gate is the right option. I feel there should be far more options in terms of therapy, more resources there, instead of putting all the resources on these crazy surgeries, to help them process what they're going through and help them get through that stage mentally to the point where they are old enough to make the decision and consent to that. Because if they consent to this and it does not go well and they regret it, it's the adult's fault. It's the parent's fault, it's the doctor's fault. And it's often not even the parent's fault because they don't know anything about this field. It's extremely scary to them. They want to save their child from, potential suicide risk, which is always put on them, and the doctors lay it out for them. They're putting pressure on them. There's so many factors that come into play with gender dysphoria, with any mental situation, and sometimes what we think we need is not necessarily what we need. Now, I'm not saying that some people don't get this and it does benefit them, and I believe it does if people say it does, but at the same time, too many kids are being fed this narrative that if they get this top surgery, their problems are going to be solved, and that is very often not the case. And I find it so heartbreaking to look at all of these detransitioners, girls who are like 17 years old and they're flat chested and they'll never have breasts. It is absolutely heartbreaking. So I think there has to be a way that we support the kids who want this to the point when they're 18.
I agree with a caveat that there does need to be some sort of process, which there is, by the way, in place.
No, there's not.
And as somebody who has experienced top surgery and also waited quite a bit of time, a lot of severe damage actually was created to my rib cage. And these are permanent damage to my body because I binded for about 8 years, and there's even still issues that I have with breathing. If I had that surgery a lot earlier, I would have a better posture. I'd have a lot of pain that is not within my body that I have to deal with on a daily basis. I was homeless at 16, paying my own rent, and left my home at 16 and had to live my life as an adult very early. So I was able to make those decisions for myself, but I think it's weird that others can't seem to see that I could make a medical decision for myself when I had to physically take care of myself. And I look at some of these younger kids, there's a sense of jealousy there and excitement for them at the same time because they now have access to memories and being in the space and being in a comfortable body.
Okay, so I have a lot of sympathy for this individual, and I do notice how he's always looking down when he is speaking, like there's clearly kind of pain going on there. But are the two options of binding and removal of the breast the only two? Binding in itself sounds insane to me, and there's this charity in the UK called Mermaids who've always been very pro activism for kids transitioning, and they had a big part to play in the gender clinic in London, which shut down, which is so inappropriate. There should never be a charity involved in decisions and putting pressure on a medical team to do things to minors. They've been known to actually send kids, young girls, binders behind parents' backs if their parents won't affirm the gender and give it to them, which is complete medical malpractice. I actually feel like that is child abuse. I just question whether binding is the right option. Are the topics being explored enough with these young women to potentially not bind until they're 18 so that they can decide whether or not this is the right choice for them? Binding clearly is not a safe thing. He's saying that his ribs are messed up, that his spine is messed up, that his breathing is messed up, which is just horrible. I feel like there must be some sort of middle ground here where, again, we offer therapy, psychological support, more support in terms of helping them navigate the world as they are until, if they have to make that decision, which is an extreme decision. These things are extreme. I feel they should be done in only the most extreme cases, and to allow any child who says, oh, I'm actually a boy, okay, let's cut off your breasts. That is so extreme. I talk to people about this and they say, well, how would you feel if people didn't allow you to be gay when you were saying you were gay? Not the same. It's kind of not the same, right? Because deciding to remove a part of your body is not the same as just embracing your sexuality. I don't have to remove any of my body to be gay. I can just be gay. And he said, there's so much excitement with the young people getting to do this. Are we viewing this in the right way? Apologies, my stories ran out. Should the concept of this gender affirming surgery be this magical thing that we're all celebrating? Look, I'm not delegitimizing that some people potentially do need this and it can be life-changing for people, but it's just the way that we're talking about it in this fantastical sense that it's just so great that we're allowing kids to do this when we're not questioning the ethics behind it and how, in my mind, messed up it is. I'm sorry, I just have to say that. And the other talking point was he said how he had to move out when he was 16, have all this independence, all this responsibility. So if he's able to do that, then why can't kids make this decision? But the thing I need to point out here is that no one should have to do that when they're 16. He shouldn't have been put in that situation. Kids should not have to move out of abusive family situations when they're 16. Just because someone went through a hardship, which I have so much empathy for, I'm really sorry that happened to him, that does not mean that everyone else should.
I don't think any minor should be having life-altering elective surgery or life-altering elective medicalization. I point out that I don't think a 16-year-old female who wants breast implants should be able to get that either. Surgeries and stuff like that, they're not life-saving. They're not, if you don't get it, you're not going to die.
She makes a great point there. I think obviously the narrative being pushed by activists and certain medical practitioners, they need this or they're at a health risk for suicide. But in most cases, that's actually not the case. It is not as black and white as that. If we don't remove all these kids' breasts, that they will be a high risk of suicide. It's actually overinflated in that sense. There's going to be many, many cases of kids who are supported through this journey psychologically, and if they're old enough, they can then make that decision.
I think there are few things more irresponsible, dangerous, than saying a child can consent to permanently removing a body part that serves an extremely important function. Detransitioners all over the country can never breastfeed their children if they can even have them, because if they did other things, that can stop them from having kids at all, right? The idea that a child can consent to a sex change, if you believe that, there's really nothing that you can believe they can't consent to. You want to move aside all the complications, all the things you can't do, the sterilization, not being able to feed your kid, just the permanent body modification. I mean, you have to be so demented. The child fully understands they don't. They don't, because they're children.
I swear, demented is her favorite word. Agree with everything she said. That concept of them, oh, well, as long as they're given all the information and they can understand exactly what they're doing, they can't understand the gravity of this situation. When I was 14 years old, this is when kind of in my brain I was solidifying the fact I was gay. I think this is who I am. I don't think I can kind of run from this any longer. But in Waltz is a doctor, and he says to me, okay, Jack, so we understand you're having these feelings that you may be gay. So I want you to sign this form that right now you are committing to being gay and only gay for the rest of your life. Okay? No, I mean, even at 14, no, because I'm still working things out. I mean, I'm pretty sure, but am I fully sure? When I read all the information about the Tavistock Clinic here in London, there was a girl who got back in touch with the clinic and said she would like her breasts back. Does that mean she understood what she was doing? Oh, today I'm going to cut my breasts off, and then next week I might just get them back. No, people like to pretend that there's no social contagion involved. And I think this is the big difference with what we have with child gender affirming care, is that before trans was this trend and this global political football that everyone's obsessed over and that's causing so much discourse, it was a very niche thing. You would never hear people talking about trans medicalization. So I would only imagine it would be the kids in the most extreme cases that actually had to come to terms with gender dysphoria on their own without it being pushed by school indoctrination of gender ideology that's not based in any science, or seeing entire groups of friends of girls transitioning, which happens. There are children, girls coming out as trans in school, and they just happen to have this whole group of trans friends. And of course, the activists will say, obviously, it takes one to know one, so naturally they'd gravitate towards other trans people. Pretty sure that trans men are even historically less common than females, and the rate is like 0.005% of the population or something like that. The rate of girls has now superseded boys coming out as trans, increased at a rate of 5,000%. Oh, well, this is because it's more widely accepted and more widely understood. If that's the case, where are all these 40-year-old, 50-year-old women coming out as trans? Don't see them. Where are they? You would have all these women coming forth saying, oh my God, yes, I've dealt with this crippling gender dysphoria my whole life. Now I can finally live my truth. Not denying that that's probably happened in some cases, but that's not what we're hearing. What we're hearing is this huge influx of children, of young girls wanting to identify out of their biological sex, girls who are more often vulnerable to social contagions such as anorexia, bulimia, OCD. It's just so sad that this is happening and that they're being led down a path through social media, through online forums, thinking that this is the answer to their mental health struggles and what's going to work for them. And in most cases, it's not. And this is where we're seeing all these detransitioners come from. I hope I'm wrong. I honestly hope I'm wrong. But people think that the current wave of detransitioners is it. And I feel like it probably is not. Because there are kids getting this done now. There are kids getting this done 2 years ago. And sometimes it can take between 4 and 10 years for a kid to grow into early adulthood, early 20s, to realize they've made a mistake. When I was 25, 26, I was still saying, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that was the right decision for me. I can't believe I used to think that way. So if I, at that age, can look back at my early 20s and think, my God, how can someone make a decision when they're 13? This is insane.
Again, there is a process. Now, I have a lot of empathy for those detransitioners that have gone through the process and they are suffering.
In my head, feel free to challenge me. In my head, it's like us bringing in this new wave of saying, well, you know, there's an age of consent for sex, but maybe adults can have sex with 13-year-olds as long as they give them all the information and as long as there's a process. Because if there's a process, then they can consent. But no. Consent is actually a thing because it's something children can't do. They can't consent to taking drugs. They can't consent to drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, tattoos, other forms of body modification, but they can consent to sterilization, having a micro penis, never being able to orgasm, removing their breasts and ability to breastfeed, and never having children.
Even
They're
among
doing that.
adults, we all do
But-
different things in our
but-
transition. Some of us
correct.
want bottoms, some of us don't, some of us want tops, some of us don't.
I
So
understand,
you
but-
need a lot of time as an adult to figure out what you want to do.
But see, the thing is, though, some adults don't even understand what they want to do. So that's the
Exactly.
kind
So
of the
how can a
thing.
child?
But
I
see,
wanna-
a
I
children,
wanna
that's,
touch
wait a
on
minute,
that.
let's not.
Non-binary should not be considered under the trans umbrella.
Okay, here we go. So, am I going to walk forward on this? So, because they said the word trans, yes, I'm walking forward on it. It absolutely is not trans. Now, if they said transgender, it should be considered under that because transgender comes from the gender ideology. Gender is a social construct, which it's not. It's not. So it comes from that. And, if you believe that there are 50 genders, then you should be able to transition from one to the other. Fair enough. I respect that you believe that. I don't believe it. I don't think it's the truth. But if you want to believe it, sure. So by that logic, non-binary can be under the transgender umbrella. Now, the problem we have is that trans historically never meant transgender. It meant transsexual. It meant someone who actually physically transitions, or at least needs to physically transition, often by approach of medical intervention. But for all the people who are not engrossed in this crazy bubble of LGBTQIA+, etc., they don't really know the difference. They hear the word trans, and that's it. So we're lumping all these people in together, and it's totally not helpful.
I think that the concept of a transgender umbrella is inherently an issue, right? Because when you're talking about something as nuanced, complex, full of social dynamics, medical dynamics, so many things to be considered. When you're talking about a transsexual, you should really be specific, right? And this entire concept actually of transgender is relatively new. Like it came about in the 70s or 80s through queer theory when originally it was about transsexuals. So for me, when I hear that non-binary, which if I'm to understand correctly, means
I think
that
androgynous.
Right, and it means you identify somewhere in between male and female.
The definition of a trans person is somebody whose body has been altered or somebody who identifies as a different gender whose body has been altered via
Right.
hormones or surgery.
And there's two genders, so if you want to say, you identify as a different gender, it had to be one of those two,
That's
which
the
would
big
make you a
argument, yeah.
transsexual if you're actually trans. No, that's a separate thing, and I think there's beauty in being separate things. There's beauty in having your own lanes, and my concern is there's so much, clearly, as we see today, really heated conversations about trans people that when you start adding in queer theory, non-binary, it just makes it muddy, and the people at home, don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
For people to push this gender ideology on society and try and manipulate and gaslight society into thinking there are more than all these genders. Gender is a social construct. People can identify as neither genders. People can be non-binary. Of course, they've latched on to the trans community because historically, people would transition and we would know that's not your biological sex, but because you're going through this process and it obviously is extremely difficult, you've put in a lot of steps to get to where you are, we're going to acknowledge you as that sex because it's respectful and it's kind and it makes sense. So they've seen this little thing going on here and think, ooh, that person was able to identify out of their birth sex and be viewed differently. Maybe I can get attention from doing this. All right, okay, I guess that means I'm trans. No, you're not. You are non-binary, feeling no genders, feeling both genders at the same time, or perhaps in the morning feeling like a man and in the evening feeling like a woman, which is just totally insane. All of us are gender non-conforming to some degree. So when we talk about gender, what we're looking at are the stereotypical, for want of a better word, behaviors, likes and dislikes, and how this translates into the gender roles that we assume in society. So for men and women, there are traits biologically that we both have on average. So this is an average. So me as a man, if someone was to guess on average what kind of behaviors I would have, they would say things like likely to be assertive, competitive, more aggressive, more egotistical, prone to more narcissism. Maybe he's interested in more mathematical-based careers, being analytical, wanting to lead. He'll be different sexually to women. To procreate, it's more advantageous for men to spread their seed. What does this translate into? Well, it actually translates into men more easily sleeping around with people and not putting as much thought into it. Now, for women, back in the day, before we had this crazy civilization, they would need to choose the right mate. in order to be protected and be provided for. They're more likely to survive and be part of this evolution, right? So women are choosier with mates. They're more selective. Now, if a woman is doing things that other people might deem as slutty, why does she get more shame? And why do women gossip more about her? Well, this is actually a form of competition between women because they want to get the most safe mate. They want to get the most protected mate. And also, society biologically are wired to judge this because we see it as irresponsible for someone who may fall pregnant to sleep around because then they may be left with this child. They may have to raise it alone. The child may suffer for that reason. If we talk about women's traits, we talk about empathy, nurturing, more prone to neuroticism, more gravitating towards social-based careers such as teaching and healthcare. Now, I say all this because this shows us that gender actually is not a social construct. Why did the patriarchy happen? Now, I'm not saying it was moral. I'm not saying it was right. But why did it happen? Because women had the natural role of nurturing and caring for a child. Men had the natural role for leading, providing, being dependable. But then this thing called civilization came about and industrialization, where all of these new things are available to us: technology, corporate industries, healthcare systems. And the thing about it is that our biology sort of continued on that path because we're animals. Just because we're the most intelligent species on the planet does not mean we're not animals and can defy our biology. So we continued on this crazy progressive path, but our biology will always come back to troll us. So the patriarchy is immoral and it's oppressive, and I do not agree with it. I don't think that should be the decision. What I'm trying to say here is that we should never, ever try and put someone in a box and say, because you're a woman, you should do this. Because you're a man, you should do that. And we should also never disqualify anyone from pursuing whatever opportunities they want to do. If you're a woman and you're more masculine in behavior, you want to pursue jobs in STEM, you don't want to have kids, you want to be a CEO of a company, absolutely great. Go and do it. Go and do it. Fully support you. Gender as a concept is because of the averages we see between men and women. And this is fundamentally driven by biology. I have many feminine traits within me. I like wearing makeup sometimes. I'm quite flamboyant with my expression. I'm a highly empathetic person. I'm a highly sensitive and emotional person. Those would be considered stereotypically and from a biological perspective more feminine. Now, does that make me non-binary? Does that mean I'm neither man nor woman? No, I'm pretty sure I'm male. And also, it's just kind of a bleak form of identity where trans people go through gender dysphoria, which is crippling. Now, with non-binary, I feel like it's disrespectful of this whole thing in itself because, let's be real, I don't think they have dysphoria. They're not intensely uncomfortable with their physical anatomy. I mean, you can say you are, but there you go. That's just my personal opinion from what I've observed. The fact that they don't have this crippling issue and they don't have an urgent need to do it, but then they're still convinced by society that they need to identify out of their birth sex and be this other thing. I just find it kind of sad. Like, there's such a beauty in embracing your natal sex. And for me, I love embracing my masculine traits, you know? For so long, I tried to subdue certain masculine traits because in the queer community, it wasn't femme enough, it wasn't non-conforming enough. But now I love both sides. I love my masculine side, and I don't feel the need to identify out of it. Every non-binary person I know that I've met, they all have similar traits: narcissism, social anxiety. They lack a course of direction in life. They lack identity and a sense of who they are. And somehow non-binary seems to be this kind of utopia and this magical planet in some other solar system that they find and they go, oh my God, this is why I've never felt like I belong. This is why I feel so insecure. This is why I've always been so lost. No, that's actually something many of us go through and the majority of people actually go through. And non-binary isn't the answer. And it certainly is not the answer to appropriate people who have a medical condition and say you're the same thing as them.
We're weakening our borders by creating this divide within our own community. This is so silly. Look, I actually understand like a lot of the points that are being made here from the conservative side because I grew up conservative. I voted, when I was 18, I voted for fucking Bush. Y'all.
Damn, girl.
Like, I was conservative.
So he says that they're weakening the borders, but he's weakening your borders. He's trying to infiltrate the borders. The borders are not yours, babe. They're their borders. Leave their borders alone. And he says, you know what? I kind of see the points that conservatives are making, but how does he actually show that? He's saying, well, you know, I used to be conservative. I used to have these awful views. That does not mean that you see the points they're making. It means that you are condescending them and saying that they're not educated and open-minded enough to have your opinion. But actually, no, they're just seeing some common sense. You walk in here with this, loud outfit saying that you're somehow not male or female, and you're the same as these people who had to go on hormones and are medicated for the rest of their life. No, pretty sure that's not the same. And I looked up this person on Instagram, and this really gets me. When someone is non-binary and their pronouns are not just they, them, not just they, she, but they are he, she, they. And I see this as narcissism, or look at me, because there's not a more narcissistic identity than saying I'm actually all three. I have such an educated and philosophical understanding of gender, and I've learned so much about gender ideology, and I'm so educated that I can now identify as all three. Ridiculous.
I actually talked so much shit about pronouns, like they, them, all this. I was like, what is this trash? How can you be a them? Blah, blah, blah,
It
blah.
is.
You were
And I did the
correct.
whole thing, the grammatically. You're interrupting me.
But you were correct. I'm just saying.
God. I mean, like, she is snarky, but I love her.
I got to spend time around other people who were non-binary, who were non-conforming, and I got to speak with them, and I got to experience their life and their experiences. And then I realized myself, I'm like, shit, maybe this is what I've been experiencing my whole life, only because I was exposed to it.
That's right, Alexander. You absolutely nailed it. Oh, yeah, I was never non-binary, but then I met this whole group of people who are all non-binary, and then, whoops, I'm non-binary. Cool. I am only non-binary because I was exposed to it. I think there's something to be explored there. Acting like they have this profound knowledge of gender and then putting on these crazy outfits and being so, look at me, look at all of this crazy gender expression I have, and then people putting them on a pedestal. Well, then why would you not see that and be like, I'm going to have a piece of that because look how much attention they're getting? Did you grow up with this innate sense of discomfort and confusion at your mind not aligning to your biological sex? No. Did you meet a whole group of people who just happened to be non-binary and then you realize, oh, I guess this is me? Yes. So how is that the same?
I mean, you're appropriating a medical condition. That's what you're really doing.
I exist. I am proof that non-binary people exist and that it is a thing. And because I'm sitting right here in front of all of you.
Another complete, I don't want to say the word lie, but I guess that's what it is about what I've said here, right? I never said you don't exist. So we can add that to the long list of things y'all have said I've said that I didn't. We know you exist. You're here. You're not fictitious, right? My point is you're different than me, and I don't even think you deny that, but yet when I say it, it's an issue, right? And when we have a community that there are so many categories, demi-girl, demi-boy, astrosexual, all this shit, but y'all can't fathom that maybe that would be a different category than what I am when we have such different, as you keep saying, and everyone keeps saying, experiences?
You can say, yeah, I just disagree with gender ideology. I don't believe that there are more than two genders. Oh my God, you're saying I don't exist. No, I'm actually very aware you exist, and you are the biggest annoyance in my life at this time, so it's very hard for me to know that you do not exist and pretend that you don't exist, but I don't agree with the ideology. Not only are we not allowed to disagree with the ideology, but we have to restructure our language in order for you to be comfortable and for you to stop annoying us, and that is where I draw the line. I'm not restructuring my language to call someone they and them just because you believe in it. I would equate it to the same thing as someone who is Muslim and saying, every time you see me, you need to say something about the Quran so that I'm validated in my belief system and that I believe in Islam and that you believe it too. No, I'm sorry, not religious. I mean, you could put this at this Alexander person. Are you religious? He's probably not. Who knows? Maybe he is. But I see it as very much the same thing. If you guys want to do you and believe in this crazy shit, do it. Please do it. But then stop getting organizations to have this they, them category. And I come back to biology again. People think I'm obsessed with biology, but I guess that's the way it's going. Our brains, through billions of years of evolution, have evolved to recognize someone's birth sex or the sex they're presenting as if they transition in a microsecond. Even in the most queer, leftist circles I've been a part of, I have seen the most woke people consistently forget to call someone they, them. And after a few times they go, oh, sorry, they. Why is that happening? You can be the wokest person in the world and still say she, oh, they. That's because it's impossible not to rewire your brain. Now, Blaire has transitioned. There's no way I can look at her and ever think man because she's put in the effort, the hormones, all these surgeries and whatever. And that is why calling trans people actual trans people by their gender identity pronoun makes sense because they actually look like that sex.
Doctors are manipulating trans medical care.
Absolutely. 57% no. Absolutely. The moneymaker involved in this industry, let's see.
The ones who are absolutely doing it for money, like we saw at Vanderbilt, literally said this is a huge moneymaker.
The videos also show financial incentives, as one doctor gushed about how much the procedures bring in.
These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000. A patient just on routine hormone treatment, who I'm only seeing a few times a year, can bring in several $1,000s.
There is so much money in gender affirming care, especially phalloplasty. I mean, the numbers say 70 grand a patient, but it's actually far more than this when you account for hospital fees. This is a big money maker. That is a literal video that is in place. She says so much more stuff like that. And if you believe that in a capitalist healthcare society such as the United States, that people are not in this for financial gain, you are very dumb.
Not just in the trans community, we're seeing in society SSRIs being pushed on patients. Mental health doctors are pushing so many different drugs without getting to the root issues.
Well, I really personally relate to this, and I'm quite passionate about Big Pharma because I've had quite a number of health issues, my autoimmune disease, and I have chronic pain. And I was led down a path very quickly of intense medicalization and put on so many medications, some of which I still have lasting side effects now, even coming off them, and I don't know if they're ever going to go away. And of course, I was a very distressed patient and in so much physical pain that all I wanted was the solution, and I trusted the medical professionals, of which I was actually seeing under private healthcare because I'm lucky enough to have insurance through my company. But even more incentive for them to push these medications on me is money for them. And in terms of my chronic pain and me finding a solution for it, actually none of those things were medications. And there was not one of those doctors, neurologists, pain specialists, none of those people actually were curious about the root cause. They were just saying, oh, okay, well, you have this unknown chronic pain condition. Let's just throw all this stuff at it. And I was desperate, so I went along with those decisions. Now, I don't think that medication does not have a place. I believe that it definitely does, but we're not empowering people to become informed patients and educating them on how to objectively make a decision. Maybe the doctor's opinion is not the only opinion. Maybe you should shop around. Maybe you should do your own research as well, explore other options first. But that's not the way the world is now. The world is, okay, you have a problem, then as soon as you have it, just take a pill.
I've been on testosterone since I was 15 years old. And even looking into it, I waltzed my little ass up into that doctor's office and I left on testosterone. He gave me my first shot in the doctor's office that day. Oh my gosh. I was 15 years old. What if I had been wrong?
Another rhetoric you hear from the woke side is kids are never going in and just being given something on their first appointment. There's such a long process. They have to go through years of therapy. No. I mean, all you have to do is Google detransitioner, Google it, and you have all these kids saying, yeah, on my first appointment, I was just rushed through it. They gave me it. I said, yeah, I kind of feel like a boy. Okay, here you go.
When we have like a for-profit healthcare system, it does happen. Like, I feel like there are I believe that people should be evaluated and go through tests. And like for me, getting on testosterone and getting surgery was a massive process in my life. But I do think that it probably happens. Just like you said, like with SSRIs and stuff, like things are overprescribed.
So I think that's great that he had a good process. Like that's how it should be. And the gender clinic, I keep harping back to this, but I want to make more videos about it, as so many of these conversations are based on the US, but in London, this clinic has been shut down because of this practice, and that people have actually sued the National Health Service for rushing kids through this process. Their model was to give kids up to 6 appointments before making the decision. And because they were under so much pressure from the activist organizations and the waiting lists, they were getting 2 or 3 before being referred for puberty blockers and hormones. And that was it. And then once they were on those puberty blockers, they had a follow-up twice a year. Every 6 months, that was it. They said that they were being given time to think, whereas actually, once on the blocker, they were given even less time to think. What the clinic in London found out after several years of doing this, just blindly, without recording any proper data, is that 99% of children who went on puberty blockers proceeded to going on cross-sex hormones. And in the world of psychology and medical healthcare, you never see a near 100% rate of anything. There's always a normal distribution, there's always a variance. So if by that logic you're putting all these children on puberty blockers and saying, oh, well, some of them are going to come off, these puberty blockers are reversible, but then, oh, wait, none of them are electing to say, actually, I wasn't trans, I was just experiencing something else. What does that say about the system? And what does that say about medical malpractice? It's a big indicator.
When I went for my initial appointment, I literally helped my doctor find gender dysphoria on his chart and mark it for me.
That's insane.
And I walked out with my prescription.
I just feel so bad that this is happening to people. And the fact that these wokies in the back can stand there hearing this, and they're very much deep into this community and activism. They hear the stories from detransitioners. They may try to block them out or actively actually try to avoid hearing the stories, but they hear them. So they know there's medical malpractice, but it comes back to this thing I say again, if they align to anything that a conservative may align to, that is betrayal. So by this fact, they are betraying all of these detransitioners who go through this process, and they are erasing them and their experience.
So I actually almost walked up just because you feel some type of way about it isn't right. Like, why do you care what little Timothy or Sally are doing or whatever? Like, why do you personally care what?
Well, Timothy and
their
Sally are 8
children.
and 12.
I'm pretty sure that wasn't the argument. The prompt was doctors are manipulating trans medical care. He's just admitted that he knows this stuff goes on, yet he didn't walk forward. Why do you care? Why do you care that all these kids should be put on hormones and get gender affirming surgery if they're not your kids? Is it not the exact same thing? Do you care about child sex trafficking? No, I just don't really care because they're not my kids. Caring about kids is, again, come back to biology, it is a biological trait in most of us to try and protect children. I don't have kids. I don't know if I ever will. Maybe I will. It is a natural instinct for us to protect kids. So these conservative talking points, they're not trying to deny help and medical care. They're observing that there is medical malpractice, that kids are falling victim to this, and they are concerned. These people feel they're trying to protect kids by cutting off their breasts. Okay, I disagree with that, but I understand these people are both coming from a place of good intentions, even if some of them are so twisted. For the most part, that is what all of us are doing in this world. Most of us feel like we're coming from a place of good intentions the majority of the time.
And it's a big world. Like, things happen all the time, things we can't even imagine happen.
It's a big world, terrible things happen to people, but do we put a system in place which actually makes it more likely for harm to fall to kids?
From what I have seen when it comes to these detransitioners, trans people are 8% of the population, and then the detransitioners are somewhere from 1 to 8% as well. So
8%? Absolutely not. 8% of the population. No. People always say, oh, but trans people have existed for centuries. Yeah, that's actually true. One fact that you're getting true here, but we have the studies dating back a long time in terms of transsexuals, men, it's 0.018% of the population. But now the transgender trend, which is very much a thing, is somehow equating it to 8%.
Percentages that were affecting people is so small. While simultaneously, if we looked at things like in the past, like HIV with things like AZT drugs that were harming folks, those folks went through all of those processes and learned the research of what it was to properly take care of HIV through that unfortunate, horrible, horrific process.
I mean, it was basically chemo.
Yeah, I mean, AZT was killing people and they had no clue what we're doing.
I can see his logic, but this person, he likes to look back at bad practices in the past and say, oh, well, because this happened in the past, then it's fine, it's happening now. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the past, which we feel should not happen again. So the fact that people were put on this AZT drug for AIDS and went through this horrible process and medical malpractice does not mean that we should accept medical malpractice in this day and age. And I understand the logic with trans men in particular. There's not a lot of research. If you're an adult, again, the stress is on adult. If you're an adult and you are being told this is a relatively new medical field, we don't know what happens to women long term when they take testosterone. If you're an adult and you can consent to that, then okay, I'm going to take the risk because I need it. Fine. But to suggest that these children, the detransitioners, we can equate to the opportunity cost of people who had to take AZT for them to learn that actually it was the wrong decision. No way. Let the adults be part in a guinea pig experiment if possible. Let them do it if they want. But when it comes to kids, no. In the UK, like, puberty blockers are banned now. How could your natal sex hormones not be pivotal to developing a healthy body, your brain, your bone density, your muscle mass, your organ functions and everything? No long-term studies on those, but where the UK is considering them is only in extreme scenarios where children are opted into a research study. I still feel uncomfortable with that, but I think if they have to use these crazy drugs, that is the only scenario in which some children who have extreme gender dysphoria, perhaps presenting from a very young age, there is no other option for them. Okay, well, they have this research trial and it's very clear that they are an experiment. Maybe. I mean, I still don't think that would be the thing. All right, everyone. I think I've had enough craziness for one night. With the last prompt that's in this one, I actually created a 10-minute video of that on my TikTok. I'm actually just going to put it after this section so you can see how I responded to the gender-affirming suicide question, as that's also an extremely pertinent topic, I think. But I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you came back after watching the first one. Did you agree or disagree with my comments? And I'd love to know from you guys, what would you like to see me do next? Are there any topics you'd like me to discuss? Any other debates or things you'd like me to react to? I already have loads of ideas in my head, but obviously the beauty of having a bit of an audience is that I can see what you guys are interested in. And I do have an exciting thing coming up because I'm having a debate with another LGBT YouTuber on Friday. So looking forward to that one, hoping that I win the debate and that you guys can support me there, but also totally fine if you disagree. So keep modeling free speech, keep commenting below, letting me know what you think. Please follow me on TikTok and Twitter. But once again, I thank you for all the support and I will see you in the next video.
Gender affirming transitions is prevention. Agreeers?
So these are for trans liberals.
Trans youth are at greater risk of ideations, which are horrible and will plague you and like ruin your life and make it awful. And so I know there are a lot of kids in a lot of pain, and growing up as a trans kid, I was in so much pain, and I feel like I could have been spared of a lot of that and gotten to enjoy my life a lot more if I had earlier access to gender-affirming care. And even the gender-affirming care that I did receive later in my life, and I went on hormones when I was like 16 and I got top surgery at 17, that completely changed my life in the most dramatic way.
So I know people are probably going to go insane at me in the comment section on this video, but I just want to clearly state that I take this issue extremely seriously. I am not delegitimizing anyone's experience, anyone's personal experience of what worked for them. And I'm really glad that this individual got the help he needed and that it alleviated these feelings he had. And I totally validate that, totally believe it, and that was the right path for him. I guess what I'd like to discuss in this video a bit is how there is nuance to the situation. Sometimes there's a bit of a blanket statement over this claim, and how we can actually tackle this issue so that the right care is provided for the right people for the right reasons.
I think too often we hear, that if we don't affirm our child's, gender identity that's different than their sex, then they're going to commit. I hear this all the time, especially from the detransition community whose parents were told this and it was manipulative.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a 17-year-old detransitioner from the Central Valley. I was medically transitioned from ages 13 to 16. My parents took me to a therapist who affirmed my male identity, and the therapist did not care about causality or encourage me to learn to be comfortable in my body. He brushed off my parents' concerns about the efficacy of hormones, puberty blockers, and surgeries. My parents were given the threat of suicide as a reason to move me forward in my transition. My endocrinologist, after 2 to 3 appointments, put me on puberty blockers and injectable testosterone.
The problem with that is that's the same line that abusers use. So when you're in a relationship, if you're going to leave somebody and they say, if you leave me, I'll myself, then that is an abusive situation.
Honestly, I think she's making a really good point. So, are some children at risk in this way? Yes. But is it fair for some kids to go in for their first appointment, second appointment with their parents and be told by a medical professional, would you prefer to have a non-alive kid or a trans kid?
From saying such things to parents as, well, would you rather have a child or a live trans child? And so they put that at the feet of the parents, which is, well, if you object to this, then all you're doing is increasing the risk for your troubled child, which is about as cruel a thing as you could possibly say to parents. I can't imagine something more manipulative and also something so ungrounded in anything approximating clinical fact.
And this is a fear-mongering tactic. It puts a lot of pressure on the parents. And of course, if you're a parent and you don't know too much about this, what are you going to do other than go ahead with that? And unfortunately, some kids are in more complex situations. They have a host of other things going on, and it won't necessarily be the right path for everyone.
Essentially emotional blackmail. They're saying, trans your kid or your kid's gonna and they say it in front of the child, and they set up this false dichotomy as if those are the only two options moving forward. And here to tell any child feeling any type of way, those are not your only two options. In fact, there is a vast array of options in between and around in transition. Therapists and doctors aren't even legally allowed to say, no, you're not trans, you're actually experiencing A, B, or C. And that's the case with detrans people as well. They have this huge host of issues: depression, body dysmorphia, anorexia, eating disorders, maybe sexual abuse in their past. People don't know that a long observed symptom of sexual abuse is wanting to be the other gender to cope with it.
I was not like a typical femme girl. I had PCOS. I was like a pretty blocky from childhood experiences of being sexually abused and kind of emotional abuse and purity culture within the fundamentalist church. For me, it made the idea of growing up to be a woman very undesirable. And I was grappling with my sexuality, and I thought I was a lesbian at the time. And frankly, I felt like my mom wouldn't tolerate me or, associate with me if I got into a relationship with a woman as a woman. So back on it, I think this was a main reasoning was, well, instead of being a lesbian, why can't I be a straight man?
Fulfilling prophecy, right? And sometimes when we create a narrative, it can kind of take on a life of its own. So I know there's a lot of talk about statistics in the trans community, and interestingly, almost all of those statistics come out of LGBT activist organizations who have an incentive to put those numbers out.
So what you're talking about too is there's not the research. You're right, there's not. Everybody likes to cite the Turbin study, and Jack Turbin is a complete activist. And you can see how much he's financially gained off of this study. And the issue is the study is based on a survey, and so it's based on a survey of adults. And so when you're doing surveys are not scientifically accurate. They're the least accurate way to do a study. And so when we're basing all this medical care off of a survey, it's a huge issue.
What Jordan Peterson was saying there, I know lots of you don't like him, but hear me out. What he's saying there is that the system fundamentally has no long-term studies on the use of puberty blockers and hormones across decades, yet they also claim at the same time that doing this prevents the risk of unaliving yourself. So those two things don't match up. And then it is well documented that lots of kids presenting with gender dysphoria symptoms, saying they want to transition, are very high in the rates of autism, eating disorders, past sexual abuse, or they are very often same-sex attracted, meaning they may grow up to be gay or lesbian. They might be from homes where there's a lot of homophobia. There is internalized homophobia going on as well. These issues are not being explored in a nuanced way. And behind all of this is big pharmaceutical companies, of which it is advantageous for them to medicalize someone for life. They can get over $1 million per patient for putting them on these drugs for life. And then it comes with a host of other problems. So it's important to recognize all of these things. Statistics being pushed by activist organizations, both in favor of kids transitioning gender affirming care and against it, have widely different statistics. And as Blaire said, they do have an incentive to push this. And as Sara said, surveys are not the most reliable way to gather statistics. Now, this study says that, for example, Parliament Women's and Equalities Committee stated that about half of young trans people attempt. The Guardian also reported a Stonewall statistic that almost half of transgender young people have attempted to unalive themselves. We can see here a transgender theologian has observed that this statistic about attempts has, in essence, developed a life of its own. One survey in America who found that half of the respondents to a survey reported attempting this, and they subsequently stated that their action was actually a cry for help and not intended to be fatal. pediatric endocrinologist who established the first clinic for transgender children in the United States, said that the majority of self-harmful actions that this person saw in the clinic were not real attempts, and they were usually not life-threatening. In the UK, the JIDS clinic was home to the Tavistock, who were providing gender-affirming care for children for a couple of decades. They've since been shut down after they were deemed unsafe. So, according to a survey that they conducted over 900 adolescents, 44% answered that they sometimes or very often deliberately tried to hurt or unalive themselves. And from the United Kingdom between 2007 and 2020, this website cites 3 adolescents under the age of 18 who actually went through with this. But then, in terms of the findings, it also says that 2 of them were listed as young transgender people, and they were actually sourced from Twitter without information on their name. And in an analysis done into JIDS from 2010 to 2020, there were 4 of these, which equated to 0.03% of over 15,000 patients, or 13 per 100,000. Because of all the discourse around this, JIDS looked into it, they've updated their website, and it actually states now that the majority of children and young people they see do not self-harm, nor do they make attempts to end their own life. They say, although there is a higher rate in general among young people who are referred to local child and adolescent mental health services, it is no higher than this statistic in trans kids. This charity, Transgender Trend, not saying I support this or agree with it, just giving you some facts. They examined some of these studies, and for example, they analysed this one, and they said it potentially is not valid as they don't feel like only 27 respondents who identified as trans is enough of a large sample size to make these claims. They've also stated that the participants were not randomly selected. They chose to do the survey, meaning the results may be skewed. And then finally, they don't actually know when these attempts occurred. Some may have occurred after social and medical transition, or some may have occurred before receiving the care. Now, I want to talk about puberty blockers as part of the gender-affirming care process, as these have become highly controversial. So Polly Carmichael, who is the director of JIDS, previously stated that the results show patient experience on the blocker is positive overall, and there were no unexpected adverse events. However, recent reanalysis of these patients saw that children on these actually saw mental health changes. Just want to caveat that this study was on 44 children from JIDS. Of these children, the data suggests that 34% saw their mental health deteriorate, while 29% improved. And those are children on puberty blockers while they were on the puberty blockers.
It was really when the first bit of data came back from this study that had begun, which challenged all the assumptions they had about puberty blockers. Every single one of them had gone from the puberty blocker to cross-sex hormone, but also that there'd been no psychological benefit to being on the puberty blocker. And so for Dr. Anna Hutchinson, she describes learning that as her holy fuck moment because it exploded everything that they were doing. She said, you know, what are the chances of being given time to think and all children and young people thinking the same way? She's like, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in psychology. And actually, these young people weren't feeling better. In some cases, both psychologically and physically, they were getting worse.
Some of the kids put on the puberty blockers, mental health was getting worse once they started the blocker. And that's against what the narrative tells us. The narrative says these interventions are supposed to make people better. And what we were seeing was parents calling and saying, my child has had the blocker in for a month. They're crying every day. They've had the blocker in for 3 months and they're now failing out of school. Things that were supposed to be getting better were getting worse.
All right, everyone, I'm not here to give my opinion on all of this, just presenting some facts, both sides of the argument to you. Based off everything you saw in this video, I'd love to know what you think. Please comment down below, and I will see you soon.